This is Frederick Douglass, chapter 4. Okay, we'll just call this one murders. Right? 5 murders talked about in this chapter. Before we begin this chapter, let's remember that when Douglass publishes this book, he is technically still a slave, right? In fact, he sends a signed copy of this book to one of his masters. Says, thank you so much for the valuable instruction, right? So he's still a slave. Yeah. Damn, right? At the same time, too, lots of these masters are still masters. So he's talking about people that still are around, probably in their current roles. And later in the book, he actually doesn't mention some people by name. He's like, some of these people that helped me, I really wish I could say who they were, but I don't want to get them in trouble. Right? So when he does use somebody's name, he is doing the opposite. He's getting them in trouble, right? So he's implicating people. A very interesting passage, or chapter 4. He uses names here. And the first name he talks about is, Mr. Austin Gore. There's a new overseer. And so one guy's replaced by another guy. So you got Mr. Gore comes in. And Mr. Gore was an overseer. Let's talk a little bit about what that was. Overseer is kind of like a manager, basically. So Colonel Lloyd, he's kind of like the CEO. So Matt, he's like the CEO of a company. He's got a couple different locations, right? And each location has an overseer, like a manager of that location. So this guy comes in, he's starting to run one of the sites, and he was being proud, ambitious, preserving, artful, cruel, right? He was one of those who could torture the slightest look, word, or gesture on the part of the slave. So what Douglass is talking about, he's getting into his managerial style. Like, how does this guy operate? And he does this with different overseers. He's like, why is this guy effective? Why is he not? Why, what's his method? When it comes to Mr. Gore, he acts fully on the maxim laid down by slave owners. It is better that a dozen slaves suffer under the lash and the overseer should be convicted in the presence of slaves of having been at fault. Basically, it's better to whip a bunch of people, slaves, than ever trying to say that you were at fault for something in front of slaves. Right? He rules 100% through fear, through physical punishment, through fear, and for never admitting that he's wrong in front of slaves. That's it. He dealt sparingly with his words, bountiful with his whip, never using the former where the latter would answer as well. So he's like, if he can whip somebody, he's just going to whip him, right? He's not going to waste his words. Focus. It's just nice. Anyway, all right. So there's a paragraph that starts, "His savage barbarity was equaled only by the consummate coolness with which he committed the grossest and most savage deeds upon the slaves under his charge." This brings up an interesting point, saying he was very cruel, but also very emotionally calm when he was doing this. He kind of just didn't really have emotions in that regard. And then he talks about, this is the first of the 5 murders, Demby, right? He once started whipping, one of the slaves. Demby, this guy runs in the water, and he just says, "Listen, I'm going to call you 3 times. If you don't come out, I'm going to shoot you. Come out." No, right? Demby made no response, stood his ground. The second and third calls were given with the same result, right? He's not coming out. So, then without consolation and deliberation, without even giving him an extra call, raised his musket to his face. Boom, right? Taking deadly aim at his staggered victim. In an instant, poor Demby was no more. His mangled body sank out of sight, and the bloods and brains marked the water where he had stood. So, he shoots. That doesn't sound too pretty. The aftermath of this, and then Douglass is saying, everyone's freaking out. The only person that isn't is Demby. He's just like, he's going about his work. He does get called into the home plantation, right, to talk to Lloyd, because remember, slaves are an investment. They're expensive. This would be as if, right, you owned a bunch of different, you're a car dealer with lots of different dealerships, and one of your managers in the dealership blew up a car in the parking lot, right? You're gonna be like, come on, you need to explain this to me. Why did you do that? And he's conjecturing, right? And he's imagining what this conversation would have been like. right? Douglas says that, right, he alone seemed cool in response. His reply was, as well as I can remember, that Demby had become unmanageable, he was setting a dangerous example, right, etc., etc., etc. So he justified it by saying, listen, this guy's setting a bad example, so I had to kill him, right? I was doing you a favor, sir. There's no crime ever brought, you couldn't convict him on the testimony of slaves. So what's Douglas doing here? He's saying, hey, Mr. Austin Gore, wherever you are, remember that time you killed that guy? Like, I do. So Douglas is saying, he's kind of bringing these publicly. I speak advisedly when I say this: killing a slave or any colored person in Talbot County, Maryland, is not treated as a crime, either by the courts or community. He talks about another guy by name, Mr. Thomas Landman of St. Michael's, killed 2 slaves, one with a hatchet, by knocking his brains out. He's heard this guy boast and laugh about this incident, which is fishy, right? So he murdered somebody like by beating them, right? 2 people, right? So there's 3 murders so far. Brings us to number 4. This is the wife of Mr. Giles Hicks. So this is a woman who, again, he beats her, breaking her nose, mangling her person in the most horrible manner, breaking her nose and breastbone with a stick, so that the poor girl expired in a few hours afterward. She was not immediately buried, right? So this is saying, like, okay, this woman beat this girl, this teenage girl of 14 or 15, so horribly that in an hour or 2 later she died, right? Why did she beat her? Because the offense for which this girl was murdered was this: she had been asleep that night on having Miss Hicks' baby. They had had a baby, and this slave's job was to take care of the baby at night. Right? When babies wake up at night, burp them and stuff, have them fall back asleep. One night, this girl just sleeps through it, and the baby's crying wakes up the master's wife, who is the actual mother of the child. And so, where were we? So anyway, she kills her for this, beats her to the point where she can't, breathe or think. There's murder number 4. Murder number 5 would be briefly narrate another, right? This is a guy named Mr. Beale Blondley. And what would happen, this guy had a little creek, or a little, what did he have? Right, they're on the Chesapeake Bay, so all these things have oysters in them, right? They used to before we overfished it, right? So this is maybe a little creek or something, or a little stream that leads to the bay. It has oysters. Colonel Lloyd's slaves would sneak down there and get oysters, right? They'd eat them. This guy goes down one morning, boom, and comes down and blows up, blew its deadly contents to the old man. He comes over to see him the next day, and, Douglas saying, I don't know if he paid him, I don't know if they just had a conversation, but, again, very interesting chapter. Douglas is saying he implicates 4 people, but 5 murders by name. He says, you guys killed people, and I know that a slave can't testify. I love Girl Scout cookies. Give me like 2 minutes. I'm teaching something. It's almost Girl Scout cookie time. I love Girl Scout cookies. All right. Interesting chapter, right? But there you go. Murders. 5.